You're live, John.
Thank you, Sasha. I'd like to welcome everybody in the Sunnidale Street community for this information session that we're having this evening. I'd like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards and caretakers of the land. We acknowledge that Clearview Township is located within the boundaries of Treaty 18, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Tinon-Tati, and the Wendat, and is the home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples as part of the intricate nationhood that reaches across Turtle Island. At this time of truth and reconciliation, we welcome the opportunity to work together towards new understandings and new relationships and ask for guidance in all we do. With that said, Sasha, I would like to hand the meeting over to Gary Scanlon with Watson and Associates. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be with the public this evening. Talk about the undertaking, go through a presentation, and then discuss some of the questions that have been advanced to us. Just to introduce everyone that you can see on the screen right now, John Ferguson, who was doing our introduction, is the CIO for Clearview Township. We also have Sasha Hemke, who's the clerk, who will be actually controlling this evening's activities. We have Mike Ron, who's the engineer for the township. He's the head of engineering, and he is the staff person who will be advising council. We also have Kelly McDonald, who's the treasurer for the municipality, who obviously is in charge of all financial matters that go through the township. Don McNulty is from Burnside and Associates. So any of the detailed engineering questions with respect to the services we'll be talking about tonight, he is his firm has been advancing the design information and advising the township. Lastly, I have my colleague Daryl Abbs. Daryl's been working with me on all of this work, and he's been putting together the presentations that we'll be going through this evening. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation. And just to give a bit of perspective, I think there was a presentation that we had distributed to the various landowners in the area. In addition to that, we had opened up the opportunity to present some questions. And I think in total, we received somewhere in the range of 31 questions. So when I finish my presentation, what we'll do is we'll take the opportunity to go through each of those questions and provide answers that may address many of the questions that might be in the minds of the individual landowners. Subsequent to that, I think there's 9 individuals who would like to make a presentation at this session. Just to be clear, this is a public information session. It is not a council meeting. It's not a committee meeting of council. It is solely to provide an opportunity to present the information to the public, receive any information, receive any questions. Subsequent to this, and I'll touch upon this, there'll be a process where we will go back to council and present the basically the dialogue that we've had with the existing residents, the dialogue that we've had with the developing landowners in the area, and then provide some perspective for council to consider. At this particular point, there's no decisions that have been made. This is a process that we're going through, and the process is something that will help to advise council and ultimately for them to make a decision. I'll just take a moment. I just want to make sure I can set this up in an appropriate manner. Now, I will identify that as I start the presentation, I think you'll see most of the individuals basically they've muted themselves right now, but they'll also turn off their cameras. That will allow us to make sure that we're preserving bandwidth in order to minimize any impacts on. I'm going to take a minute, just a second. Just give me a moment, please. I'm having a bit of a problem, so. I do apologize. Just give me a moment and I think I'll be in good shape. All right. My colleague Daryl says that I'm technologically impaired, so you do have to bear with me for a moment. Can everyone see the presentation now?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Gary.
Excellent. So I'm going to stay on the visual. I know that when I deal with a lot of meetings and such, it's always important to see the individual speaking to me. So there's a little bit more connectivity in the presentation. So this is my preference, and this is how we'll move. So the starting point for all of this is the municipality as a background. So before we even start into the details of this process, municipalities across Ontario, so it's legislated by the province, and then individual municipalities have to undertake long-term plans, and they're more plans to identify what areas within the community will receive water and wastewater municipal servicing, and then to talk about all the different services that will be provided to the residents: parks, recreation, roads, etc. All of that is established within an official plan. So all municipalities adopt this official plan. And the Clearview has obviously undertaken that in conformity with the provincial requirements. Now, the township's official plan, so the first bullet, the township does have an official plan, and it was established, the latest and greatest was in 2001, but there have been a couple of amendments to that plan. The long-term policies that have been established going back to 2001 was to identify that within the urban boundary that's been drawn around Stayner, that all of those lands are ultimately to be serviced with both municipal water servicing and municipal wastewater servicing. And some of the criteria that are set out is to basically implement it over time, and where there's opportunities to do cost sharing, not only with the existing residents, but with new residents, development lands, is to take advantage of those opportunities and to then move ahead to provide servicing. So within the total urban boundary that's around Stayner, all of the lands ultimately are planned to have both water and wastewater servicing. And that's the starting point, and that was established many, many years ago. And over time, the municipality has been moving ahead to basically provide not only wastewater services, but water services to different properties throughout the municipality. Now, obviously, or throughout this community. Now, obviously, the developers will be providing some of those services to the new lands. There are opportunities as they move ahead to piggyback on their infrastructure, and in order to minimize the individual costs to property owners. So with that, you can see that there is the southeast area of Stayner, and there is lands within this section. Manortown are one of them. I'll show you actually several different properties that are potential development areas, or areas that are moving ahead to develop. And collectively with those lands, there was a servicing assessment that was undertaken by Burnside. Now, that servicing assessment is actually under, once again, legislation. It's the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. It's called an EA. And they undertook that work in order to assess should Manortown, just that particular development, undertake a servicing solely for itself, or are there opportunities to expand that out and potentially pick up some development lands that are in the specific area, and to include some of the existing properties. And then there was a third evaluation that said, let's go out and take a look at some lands that are still in the boundary, but it doesn't appear that they're to a state that we can actually service them in the near term. And they may be looking at 10, 12, 15 years, 20 years out before those lands would be available for servicing. And sorry, just a second. So there are different properties that we're going to talk about. So within this servicing area and within the EA that was undertaken by Burnside, they look specifically, option one was just taking a look solely at this development, which is referred to as Manortown. To take a look at option two, which was to include existing properties, which are highlighted in the light blue. And as well, there are adjacent or within the direct area properties, development properties, which would benefit from this servicing. So they would be included, and they would share in the infrastructure. There was also a third option, which looked, if you look at the very bottom, hopefully you can see my cursor, or, well, you can't maybe see my hand. Oh, there we go. These lands that are to the side are basically which were referred to in earlier presentations, Area I. And those lands were the ones which were looked at developing over a longer period of time. Now, we have gone out, municipal staff and Burnside and ourselves, and we've talked with all of the landowners that are in that broader area. And at this particular point, they're not looking to move ahead with servicing. So we've talked with them. We said, fine, if you're not going to move ahead at this time, there's probably some cost benefits to doing it. But if you don't capitalize on this opportunity, there will be a sizable cost to hook into the system, and you will have to bear 100% of those costs. Landowners aren't at the point, they may be landowners, but not necessarily developing landowners. And basically within that area, there was no real willingness to move ahead to do the servicing. So that area, so with each of these options, there was a cost, and the cost varied between individual lands depending on the option. Where we've landed is to consider the option two, which is what we have presented here, identify the developing lands, and as well identify the existing properties as part of the servicing scheme. Once again, the existing properties being considered as part of that overarching official plan that was established many years ago, which is to ensure that water and wastewater services are provided throughout all of the Stayner community. The costs that we're talking about, there is, we broke it into a couple of different components. There's the new pumping station and a new force main. Now, I'll show you this on a map and explain a little bit more about the servicing in a minute, but roughly that's sitting at about $4.2 million. There is sewer works. So these are really the linear works or the sewer mains that are going to be constructed. Some of them are basically going to be cost shared with developers. And with those cost shares, some are going to be paid by existing residents. And actually there are additional sewers which will be paid specifically by the developing landowners. So within a subdivision such as Manortown, all of the internal works, all of the internal sewers, they will pay for on their own. They will also contribute to some of the sewers outside, which benefit other landowners. And I'll show you that in a minute. So the linear works are about $3.5 million. At the same time, the policies within the official plan is to move towards urbanization. So in order to provide for storm sewers, sidewalks, and roadways. And that's what's under that road work urbanization within the road width, where you have your existing road. The plan is to convert those roads, because we're going in to put in sewer works. We have to start to crack open the road to put the sewers in. So we would be looking to replace that with a new road that has not only a more significant newer base and top, but we'll also be putting sidewalks, streetlights, sewers, etc. So that cost of the works is approaching $2.9 million. And the last one is currently under the roadway on Sunnidale, there is a water main. The water main was put in many years ago. It's undersized to service the existing properties and add on the future development in the southeast area. So while we are doing the road works, the sewer works, we're going to replace that existing water main in order to ensure that there's expansion capability in the southeast area. So not only within this area, but there will be other lands that will ultimately flow or receive water from that particular pipe. And it has to be upsized to make sure that there's no impact on the, your water pressure, et cetera. So in total, we're looking at works that are about almost $12.3 million. As we go through, and just to be in advance, directly, there will be no charge per lot that deals with waterworks for the existing residents. So that will be funded predominantly by development charges, so developer contributions. There is a contribution from the existing water rate budget, but we've already included that as part of the rates that you will that you're looking at paying. The road works, once again, that is 90% paid for by development, and there will be a 10% contribution which has to be made, and that will be put into the broader property tax rates. So actually across all of Clearview, the improvements of that, so 10% or about 280,000 will actually be funded from property taxes, and the money will be across all of the municipality. And so what we'll be looking at is cost sharing with these top two items, the pumping station, force main, and the sewer works. There will be a cost sharing in between new development and the existing properties. And I'll go through to demonstrate that as we proceed through the presentation. Now, to explain the servicing, This is what is contained in that $12.3 million. Now, this is the sewer part. So there's the pumping station, the force main, as well as the sewer mains. But to quickly say, the water main, just to jump ahead, the water main really is this extension that goes from along Sunnidale from the very eastern side and comes right across to the western side. So that's the water main. And once again, that is not being paid at all directly through any of the existing properties along this line. That'll be paid for through these broader development charges, which are what the developer pays for. The roadway, so the road will be, as I've noted, constructed from the western side to the eastern side to the western side. Once again, that's part of the urbanization plan that the municipality has set aside. Actually, 90% of that's paid for by growth, so development charges, and there's 10% which will come back on via property taxes. But actually, the municipality has set aside year to year to year contributions towards urbanization across all of Stayner. So actually, it's your portion of those annual contributions that you'll actually be drawing down. So there's reserves, there's money already set aside. So this urbanization, this roadway, the sewers, street lights there, the money's actually already been raised and is sitting in a reserve fund account to be drawn down upon. Okay, so there's the water, there's the roads, which won't be a direct cost on the individual properties here. But now I'm going to talk about the sewer related works. I'm going to start with to talk about the linear. Okay, so I'd start right here. I'm not sure. Daryl, can you go online for a minute and just tell me, can you see my cursor or not? I'm not sure with the Zoom how it's working.
No, you can't see.
Can you see my cursor?
No.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to have to talk to it. So if we go to on Sunnidale, I'm along more of the western side, and I'm looking at the red line at the top, the left-hand side of the red line. And there's the red line, and then there's the cayenne or the light blue line. Okay, so I'm starting there. And I'm going to start talking first about the red line. So coming down the red line, right at that point of that break between the red and the cayenne or the light blue, that's where the topography changes for, and this is where the engineers design the works primarily on gravity. So for sewage, what they try and do is minimize the cost by designing so that all of the flows come to a gravity to the low point, and then they'll take that and they'll pump it. So we'll stop there. So this between the red and that cayenne, the light blue, that's the breaking point for the where the flows are going to go. So from this red line and then going to the east is the flows are all going to the towards the pumping station. So the benefit, the red line really is to service directly the properties that are adjacent to that red line. So all of those properties, the flows associated with hooking up are being included solely in that red line. Now, if we take a look, there's to the above, there's a dark blue line. That is a servicing, just a representative servicing pipe that comes through all of those developments and hooks in to Sunnidale. And it hooks in basically at the point between the red and that gray blue color. And from that point forward, that gray blue is now taking the flows associated with the higher, the red, the properties that hook into the red. It's now taking all of the growth in those properties, and then it's also taking all of the flows associated with the rest of Sunnidale. So that light blue is taking collectively all of the flows associated with that. Now that dark blue isn't in our costing. That is 100% paid for by the developing landowners. It is not in our calculations at all. As they develop their properties, those are what's their internal works, and the developers pay 100% of their internal works. So that's not even in the calculations. So what is in the calculation is the red, and then that light blue, and then the light blue goes down to where it makes a turn to the north, and that green pipe goes into Manortown subdivision, where the new sewage pumping station will be located. Okay, so we've looked at the flows associated with all of those lands coming down the pipes, and we've actually allocated the cost of the pipes based on the flows, who's benefiting from the flows that are going along that. So the red is 100% existing residents. As we move down into the light, into the blue, there's a higher proportion that's funded by the developers, a lower portion that's funded by existing residents. And then everybody's cost sharing the green. On the east side, so this is, I'm talking about the pink main that's on Sunnidale now. That's picking up the properties that are on the eastern side. So there's two existing commercial developments which will hook into that system. And as you can see, there's also some properties on Sunnidale. So those existing properties are hooking into the system via that pink pipe. And then obviously their flows also go into the green. So the green has a combination of existing and growth in the calculations. And keep in mind, all of that's important because as we've looked at each of these pipes, we've looked at the flows associated with the development lands, with the existing lands, and we've shared the cost of the pipes based on the flows going through. Now we hit the pumping station, and you can see the SPS is the sewage pumping station. So there's a cost associated with creating that pumping station. So all of the sewage comes down and collects, and then it's actually forced, it's sent uphill, and that's what the dotted line is. That's a force main. So the sewage is being forced against gravity. So now it's going uphill, and it's going to reach the point where it hits that cayenne or that lighter blue, that kind of neon blue main. So now that neon blue main is picking up all the sewage from the pumping station. So it's collecting everybody that's to the east, the sewage, growth and non-growth, and then it comes into that blue, that cayenne pipe. And the cayenne pipe is not only taking those flows, but now it's picking up properties that aren't serviced on Sunnidale. So now moving to the west, all of those properties and the associated flows are going into that cayenne colored pipe. We move across, and then there's the orange pipe. So the orange pipe is just servicing a couple of different properties. It's actually now undersized. The size is too small to take the flows, so we're going to have to upgrade that particular pipe. Now, so that cost is included, and that cost is basically cash cost shared amongst the existing residents and the growth. And then we move into the yellow. So going down Phillips, there's a construction cost associated with a brand new pipe that's going to have to go northerly on Phillips and then out onto Highway 26. Now those particular pipes are cost shared with development. So if I take a look at that, hopefully, and so all of the different costs, if I just show on the right-hand side, you can see here's all the components that I've just described, and here's all the cost elements. Once again, those costs are solely sewage related. So those are the ones that we are looking to cost share with the developing landowners. Now, there are a number of, what we've done is we've calculated the properties. There's some commercial properties for development. We've got some development properties that'll have a mix of singles and then medium density. And obviously we have some existing homes. What we've done is, what SDE is it's a single detached equivalent. So we've looked at the flows for a single family home, and then we've looked at medium density and commercial, and we've converted that in all of the flows based into a single detached equivalent. That makes it very easy as we're distributing cost, is that, you know, maybe a commercial development, your development is generating the flows equivalent to 20 single family homes, single detached equivalents. So you're going to be charged on that basis. So they are basically going to be charged in a similar manner that each existing home is going to pay. But we've looked at their flows and we put it as an equivalent to those existing properties. So as we do these calculations, the existing properties there are 77, and that would include, you know, vacant lot. Those are existing properties. And then there's developing properties, which include some vacant lots along that line. So they will be serviced. So they will be charged the same as any existing. So along Sunnidale, there's some vacant properties. They will be charged the same as a property that is existing. And we'll be hooking up. And then we'll also be distributing across those development lands that we talked about. So when we take a look at all of these different costs, we've cost shared them in a couple of different ways. The developers, so either through specific charges, or they also are charged a development charge. That's a special charge which municipalities impose on all developments so that they all contribute towards new infrastructure that has to be constructed. So development charges, there's a special piece of legislation. There's charges have basically been in place, these charges, since the mid 1955. They've kind of evolved over time, but they've been there to help municipalities for many, many years. So through this, the developers are either paying directly or they're contributing towards all of these works. And in total, the developers will be paying for 75% of the works. So you can see that they're paying 90% of the roadworks. They're paying basically about 55-60% of the waterworks, and they're cost sharing with the sewer works basically on that relationship I showed you entirely. So we've split these costs generally on this basis. So the developers will pay for over $8 million on these works. The existing properties, which are the ones primarily on Sunnidale, but some of the adjacent properties as well, about $2.6 million. And then there are recoveries. So the sewer works, there's about $600,000, which will be paid for through the sewer rates that are currently in effect. So we have water rates and sewer rates. The sewer rates have planned for this expenditure, so that'll be paid for, drawn down from reserves, et cetera, in order to fund it. There's a special for the road. There's a special urbanization fund, which has been set up. We're going to draw down on the funds that are actually in place right now. And then the waterworks as well. We've got existing reserve funds, which we'll draw down. So that'll be $1.6 million. So the cost that, as we move ahead, and we're taking a look at, excuse me, we're taking a look at the recoveries from the existing landowners. We're really talking about 2.6 out of the $12.3 million. Okay. So the costs, and maybe I'll just move to the side, the costs here are based the $2.6 million, and we're divided by 77 single detached equivalents. So those are the existing properties, works out to 33,000. Excuse me, just need some water. So as I say, there are rules and regulations in place. We have legislation that has been appealed for something like development charges. There's over 150 pieces of case law that guide us on how we do our calculations. So we must distribute on a benefit on who's benefiting from some of these infrastructure items, which is the approach that we've done. So we've allocated, as you can see on the prior slide, we've allocated about 2.6 based on those directions. And on a servicing 77 existing properties is about $33,000 per lot. So that's the charge that would be considered as part of the sewer servicing. Now, municipalities across Ontario have done similar types of things. In fact, the municipality, so Clearview, has done this with other areas within Stayner, has actually undertaken a similar type of servicing and a similar type of cost recovery with existing property owners. What they've normally done is to provide for, if you 33,000 is a sizable amount, obviously. And you have the option, you would have the option to either pay it up front. So maybe you might want to put it onto your mortgage, extend it over 25 years. Those are financing options that you have as an individual. Alternatively, the municipality will provide a 20-year loan, and the interest rates are right now, actually, the interest rates are about 2.7%. So they're actually a little bit lower. We've rounded it up to 3% because potentially it could be a year or so before the municipality actually goes to do the financing. So we've been a little bit conservative by upticking it a little bit to rounding it up to 3%. That translates to $2,268 annually each year over those 20 years. Excuse me. The servicing that we've talked about basically puts the sewer in front of your property, and obviously it does the sewage pumping station and forest main, but the pipes will be located in front of the property, and then there will be a connection which will be extended from that pipe to the property line. And that's where those costings stop. And each individual property would then have to seek to decommission their septic system and then put a connection from the house to the sewers. So that would be a cost borne directly by the individual property owner. So in addition to the costs that we've talked about, there'll be a direct cost to basically connect up from the house to the sewer. Now, all of this, the last note, obviously we're going through a process right now. All of this is all contingent on council considering this proposal, and at the end of the day, seeking their approval to move ahead or to modify or to do something different. So from this point, we have presented our findings to council. I mean, we presented a preliminary, very high-level review many months ago. And then from that point, we actually have worked to be more refined in the project cost estimates, in ensuring which properties would hook in and benefit directly from it, revisiting some of the calculations, et cetera. So at the end of the day, we have been back to council 4 weeks ago and have made a similar presentation as we're doing today. They've advised that we should move ahead to a public information center like we're doing tonight, and we'll receive that information and then that'll be input into council. So October 25th is the date that we're looking to be back to council and have a discussion with them. The council report will be available through the municipal website. You can look at it. There's always a potential to provide a delegation. So there's a continued process in dialogue with council. If they approve it and if we move ahead, then we would be looking to commence the works in 2022. And the completion would be at some point during 2023, potentially no later than the beginning of 2024. So that's all dependent upon the timing of doing the design, letting the tender, and seeking the final construction plan from the construction company that'll be putting in the works. Payments are, if we are in 2024 and we do the financing at that point, then in theory, we'd be looking at 2025 for the payments. So we'll be looking at that. If it's accelerated timing, potentially the requirements for the payments may start in 2024. If the construction extends into 2024, then the payments would start in 2025. So that's something that is not 100% clear. The engineers have some preliminary timelines. We can take a look and see how that evolves. Excuse me, I'm just gonna take a drink of water here. So hopefully I've described the undertakings. As I say, there's a lot of different works that are there. There's a lot of different numbers. But at the end of the day, the water main is not directly paid for by residents in that area. The urbanization of roads, the municipality has been setting aside the money. We have reserve funds, so that money would be spent. So there's not a direct charge to adjacent property owners. So really what we're talking about through this process is solely for the sewage. We reached out and we identified that there was opportunities to send in questions in advance of today, and we would answer those questions. So basically, that's what we're going to do now. I think I noted there's 31 questions. So we're going to move through and talk about those questions and provide answers. So hopefully we've covered off all of the questions of today. And as I say, there's some presenters, maybe there's further observations, points of clarity, questions. We'll see as they make their presentation. So if I go through, primarily, I'll make response to this. You can see Don McNulty from Burnside has just turned on his video, so you can see Don directly as he's asking. Mike Ron as well, who's chief engineer for the township. He'll also be answering questions. And then, as I say, whether there's any questions to the treasurer or the CIO, we can pull them up as well. First question, why do residents have to pay for the costs? So I think early on, I explained that this was part of a long-term plan for the municipality. And I took some time to talk about the official plan because it sets out the long-range vision for the township, and specifically with different development areas within the township. Within here, they had drawn the lines around an area that said this is our urban area. New development, as well as what we want to do over time, is to all of the residences within that area will evolve towards water and wastewater municipal servicing. So that's been identified, and we will, that's what part of this plan is. As well, urbanization of roads and such is also part of those policies. So this is a vision that was established basically 20 years ago, and it has been moving forward over time. Was there a bidding process? So this is the bidding process is really for the construction of the pumping station, the forest main, and the sewers. That hasn't been done yet. We've done design work, and Burnside have gone through to assess the costs on what it would construct. But now we move from those estimates to actual tendering. And based on the tenders, we'll know what the exact final costs are. Third question, has the township requested funding from the province and the federal governments? The municipality has been very diligent in reaching out to the province and the federal governments continuously. They've been, I know the treasurer, this is kind of a mantra in her mind, and she's been looking at every opportunity. Unfortunately, at this particular point, we were hopeful that we would see more grant programs coming out of COVID. We were hopeful to see more programs that would be there to help stimulate the economy. As far back as a year and a half ago, the feds were talking about some type of funding. We have not heard anything from the province, but at this particular point, there's no funding available. So we've looked for some ad hoc money. At this particular point, funding has not been provided to any projects within the township. Are the residents on Sunnidale also paying for costs related to new development? So there are works that are benefiting both existing residents and benefiting new development. When you do the cost sharing of that, the costs actually reduce, and it becomes a lesser amount for when you do the cost sharing. There are other communities where I'm looking at full servicing of sewage, and for existing residents, those costs are basically well in excess of the costs that we're talking about here. So it is a large amount. It is a cost that needs to be considered. It's not out of line with septic systems. I live in the country. 22 years ago, I built my septic system at $28,000. Given 22 years inflation, I'd say it's probably in the range of over $40,000 if I was to construct that from scratch today or replace it. I know one of my neighbors had to do it. It was a sizable cost for them. So replacing existing septics is expensive. Providing municipal servicing is expensive as well. So you are paying for a portion of the cost. I wouldn't believe what we've done on the township behalf is in any way subsidizing the development community. I think there's a requirement for us from legislation to do an appropriate cost sharing. So I think everybody is appropriately sharing in these costs. What's the timeline for the project and the timeline to pay? I think I hit that towards the end of the presentation. Dawn, perhaps you're on board. You'll be the overseeing the tender process. Maybe I'll let you speak to that.
It is a major project, and the commencement time for final design will be subject to council's decision. So the schedule that you had put up is contingent on the timing of council's decision, but on the basis that they would be deciding that this fall and final design could occur over the next few months, then construction and the bulk of construction would occur in 2022. Quite often these construction projects, final cleanup does extend into the next year, particularly with relative to top course asphalt. There would be base course asphalt in the first year to maintain travelability of those roads. I would reiterate, you had sort of provided a schedule relative to the construction period, which I think is relatively conservative, and the potential time for connections and payment, which were appropriate in your presentation. So.
Thank you, Don. 6, has the township undertaken a similar process where residents, existing residents, paid for municipal sewers? And if so, where and how many? So I think I chatted with staff. And as I understand, over the X number of years, there's been requirements. Well, initially there was putting in the sewage plant to service all of Stainer, and that along with pipes. So all of Stainer basically paid for the servicing of the existing residents. Subsequent to then, I think there's been servicing bylaws with respect to Mowat Street, Lock Street, at Scott Street, and there may have been another one, but I didn't take note of it. So yes, there has been this has been undertaken numerous times. As I say, going back to the official plan, that's been the direction that's been provided for the Stainer community through the official plan. And as things have been, opportunities have arisen, the municipality has looked to capitalize on those opportunities. What is the process for determining how much new development pays versus existing residents? I think I've gone through that. So there are costs that will be directly paid for by the developers. Keep in mind that the cost distribution here, we've looked at the pipes that come along Sunnidale. We've looked at the force main. So all of that's been cost shared. In addition to that, the developers also have to pay for their sewers that go through their individual properties. So there's an added cost to them by putting in the internal works in the streets that they're going to construct. So Manortown will have, residential streets, and they'll have to provide the sewers through that. I think in the diagram I showed you, that dark blue pipe, that's just the main collector, but there'll also be other pipes. So from what we've done here, there will also be on top of that added cost to the developing landowner. Item 8, the growth related share of the costs with area I are higher than without. Why is area I excluded? So I think I talked about that very early on. There was 3 options. Manortown by itself, looking at Manortown plus the area that we're talking about right now, and then what was called area I, which was the ones that were across the bottom. The costs were much higher to include I, because obviously there's more pipes involved, bigger pipes, bigger pumping station, changes to the force main, all of that. So the costs were actually quite a bit higher. Because they're not moving ahead right now, we've reduced the costs, and then we distributed the costs, as I say, across the benefiting properties. Now, to note, when I comes in, there will be all of the costs to accommodate them. So they'll have to come again from the south. Any of the upsizing of the force main or the pumping station, extensions of sewers to service their land will be 100% paid for by them. We've talked to them. We've, given our perspectives. And at this particular point, area I has chosen not to move ahead. So we haven't included them. What will be done about traffic on Sunnidale? Now, this is a little bit outside of the servicing realm, but maybe Don, do you want to take a moment? Are you comfortable in giving some perspective to this?
Yeah, as you said, Gary, it is really outside of the sewage servicing issue that's before us here, but there has been a traffic study done for the current proposed development, and that's traffic study looked at the current traffic counts on Sunnidale, on the area roads, what impact the development would have increasing those traffic counts. And that study was peer reviewed and against provincial design standards. So the province has design standards for what roads are, what required roads are needed for certain amounts of traffic. And the accumulated traffic of existing and for the current proposed development, we're still well within those guidelines. And sorry, just a second. They were well within those guidelines, and so in the future, as additional development comes along, they will also be required to look at their impact on traffic counts and traffic on Sunnidale Street and all the area streets and intersections to determine whether they are still within the required level of service that's imposed by provincial standards. And if there are improvements, then those costs would be assigned to the respective developments as we proceed down the road in the future.
Thanks for that, Don. Number 10, will the sewer upgrades be able to handle the commercial development in the area, and where will they connect? So the benefiting commercial developments were part of that more to the north part of the map that I was showing you. And when we did the servicing map, you could see that the blue line, that dark blue line that came across and then came down and connected up with Sunnidale at where the red and that gray blue pipes were. That's the servicing connection with respect to the commercial development. So therein, they are contributing towards their proportion of the flows to the servicing. 11, please explain how the hookup process and design will look for properties 241, 247, 253, and 259. The dwellings are on these properties are behind the creek. As an economist, that's outside my pay grade, so I think I'll ask Don to perhaps address that.
So during the final design stage of determining the elevation of existing sewage connections into the existing septic systems, that we will be looking at that and determining required elevations for the individual service connections. Because they are behind the creek, there may be some sensitivity about crossing the creek that can be overcome with directional drilling those service connections under the creek if required by the Conservation Authority. So yes, I think those individual lots we need to pay particular consideration to in the final design stages. I will sort of include a response to the next question as well, which will the NVCA be involved for each property? And any time that there is a creek crossing, they do become involved. We would say that the NVCA generally strongly supports in the built settlement areas for the residents to be on full services and to have a direct connection to a sewage system. Keep in mind that the Conservation Authority is also responsible for source water protection matters, and so there is a municipal well in the area, so we would certainly anticipate that they would strongly support whatever they can do to see this project proceed successfully relative to source water protection and relative to getting people onto full services.
Excellent. Thanks for jumping ahead and dealing with question 12 as well, Don. 13, can the force main be sized for future development with the option for residents to hook up? So the infrastructure right now is sized for the lands that we talked about. So that's the development properties that are in and around the Sunnidale area, and the properties along Sunnidale, and those commercial properties that are at the very eastern side of Sunnidale. As I've noted, if additional future development comes forward, if that's from area I, there we'll have to look at the servicing impacts, and they will pay 100% of the servicing requirements associated with that. 14, given the uncertainty of the construction cost, do the figures have an allowance built in, and how will the potential cost overruns be distributed? So Burnside has been updating their costs. There are contingencies built into their estimates. Basically, because we're moving from this year to next year, the cost that we presented today will not increase more than 2%. That's the maximum increase that you might see. You might see a reduction if the costs go down, but a maximum adjustment of 2% is all that would be provided to that $33,000 figure. 15, for existing dwellings, where the cost of sewer connection, where the cost of sewer connection can be considerably more versus new construction, can there be something done to help buffer these costs? So the costs that we've distributed are actually equal to developing lands as well as existing. It is noted that there are additional costs over what we've calculated associated with hooking up to the sewers, but as I've indicated as well, there'll be additional internal costs that the developers will have to build their own sewers and then provide their own hookups to the house. So we haven't included those costs as part of this. So there's a distribution of the major infrastructure, but the developers also have to provide all of the infrastructure internal to the subdivision, including their hookups from the house to the sewers that they will build on the streets. The SDEs, so this is the single detached equivalents, have changed over the course of the study from 90 to 77. Please explain. So basically the initial mapping that we had and looking at the potential flows, the initial analysis also, if you recall, included area I. So from the EA and moving from understanding exactly what properties will be moving ahead and such, there were some adjustments to the SDEs. So the sizing, those properties have been reduced, but we have included all properties that'll hook into the system. And I'll just note that, for some of the developing properties, you may have, a property for commercial, but it doesn't necessarily just pay one SDE. We've calculated how, as I've noted before, the flows associated with that one vacant parcel, and they may be paying 5, 6, 7 SDE equivalents for their particular lots. So anyway. Well, what does urbanization entail? Will the road have storm sewers, sidewalks, street lights, etc.? I think from an engineering perspective, I'll pass this on to perhaps Don.
Yes, so I think you had mentioned this in the presentation as well about the urbanization, and I think it pretty much covered it. It's anticipated that in the end you would see sidewalk, which doesn't exist now, curb and gutter and storm sewer for drainage, street lighting, sort of regraded boulevards to the property lines on both sides. So that would be typical of other urbanization projects that have occurred in the Stainer community, as well as other places in Clearview, and certainly typical of other municipalities as well.
Thank you, Don. Will there be any additional expectation costs from residents regarding their eaves troughs, their sump pumps, etc., connections, outflow while the culvert is under construction and after the sewer line is in place? Don, I think this is certainly something you can handle well.
Yeah, so typically, and the question specifically is addressing sort of drainage matters, outlets from eaves troughs, and discharge from sump pumps, both of which are not to go into the sanitary system, but are storm drainage and stormwater. And so typically those outlets should be discharged and directed to the rear yards. And in those cases, those outlets really should not be impacted by the proposed work on Sunnydale Street. The overall drainage in the area has to be considered through the final design process. And there, you know, we acknowledge that there may be some existing drainage outlets that come to the front yard and to the existing road ditch on Sunnydale Street. And those outlets will have to be accommodated in the final design. There is a storm sewer in association with urbanization. There will be a storm sewer, which will have catch basins for drainage. And so in some cases, those front yard, if drainage is coming to the front yard, it'll be discharged ultimately into the storm sewer. It cannot go into the sanitary sewer. So.
Thanks, Don. Can you give residents an approximate cost for additional charges we'll be receiving on our taxes, I guess the water rates, the property taxes, and the new to us wastewater charges? So with respect to taxes, for the most part, these works have been planned for. So as I've noted, the municipality, as part of the budgeting process, has put aside money each and every year that they put into a reserve, and it's there to draw down for urbanization. So that road improvements that Don was talking about, you know, with the item with the construction of the roads, that's already been, the money's been set aside for this particular purpose. So we'll be drawing down on that. So in essence, it's already been funded through the taxes. With respect to water, there's a minor amount, $280,000 I've identified that would be contributed towards that water main. It's basically to recognize, you know, that the water main was put into place. It's been there for a number of years. So it is a replacement. So there's some minor benefit to existing residents. So there's a cost borne. This has been planned in the capital budget for the water rates. So it has been taken into account in the calculations that are there. Wastewater charges, right now, you don't pay for those charges, but the wastewater charges generally are a function of your water bill. So generally, if you look at what you're paying annually on your water bill, your wastewater bill would be about 89% of what your water bill is. Looking at this particular area, you know, there's the potential use of about 125 cubic meters per year. So if you take a look at your water bill, how much you're consuming, if that's the range that you're in, then for 2021, the bill is about $508. If you take 89% of that, then the additional cost will be $386 as your contribution to the wastewater bill. So that includes long-term maintenance, that includes taking the sewage, taking it to a sewage treatment plant, treating it. So from an environmental perspective, it's being dealt with, you know, at a higher municipal level. So those would be the additional cost. Primarily, I would say on the new wastewater bill that you would receive. What permits will residents be expected to procure for this project? Decommissioning septic systems, plumbing, trenching, laying of pipe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as I understand, basically, what you would need is a building permit application. So that would encompass these changes that you'd make to the septic system, including the hookup to the roadway. That being said, the building permit is $170. So my understanding is that's all that would be required. Now, the $170 is an added cost since this has been raised. Actually, we've talked with staff. It's something that, you know, should probably be raised through this process, whether the municipality would wish to waive that $170 for the hookup. But the maximum would be $170. If council wishes to consider some type of adjustment to that, then that would obviously reduce that cost. But as we understand, in addition to what your cost would be to basically do the hookup, the only additional cost would be the $170. Yeah, so would council consider waiving it? As I say, we've gone under discussion with that. I think that's something that should be raised, and council can consider it. Why is the Cayenne pipe included in the overall cost to the existing residents? As I've noted, all the breaking point in that servicing, if you go back to the map, there's the red and the Cayenne. That's the breaking point. So everything to the east, the sewage is flowing to the east and actually flowing down to the pumping station. Once it reaches the pumping station, it actually flows. It's going to be pumped back uphill and to the Cayenne colored pipe, that kind of bluish neon pipe. And that's where all of the flows go. So that's a brand new pipe, and it has to be sized to take all of the flows. So that's why it's been included as part of the cost sharing calculations we've done. Can the money to be used for urbanization instead be used to offset the cost of the existing residents? So as I say, the money for the urbanization, that's raised through property taxes. That's an annual amount that council has set aside for a specific purpose. And the purpose is the urbanization of the roads, putting in the curbs, the gutters, the sewers, the streetlights, the sidewalks. So that's where the money comes from. So council has not used that money to then cross over into water or wastewater, which are separate user fees, and they have not crossed over to try and subsidize any of those works. 23 talks about why is 1.9 million being put towards the main street for a crosswalk and parking and not towards the sewers. So I think this one is, once again, one of those questions that's outside of the direct servicing, but perhaps Don, do you have some insights you can provide on that, please?
I think the only thing I would say on that is that they are separate projects, and generally any reserves that are put away and in the budgeting process, monies are set up for different types of projects, and the reference to those dollars being put towards the main street and the crosswalk, those are road and transportation related projects and not sewer projects. And so it's a separate project, a separate pot of money. Those reserves need to be used for road projects as well.
Thank you. 24, how does this work affect the marketability of our homes? My experience in working with a number of municipalities in providing this type of servicing, I'll direct you to, if you know King City, if you know Nobleton, we went through a similar process to service existing residents, as well as providing for new growth, servicing with municipal water and municipal sewage is more desirable to potential homeowners. And it actually, in our experience, has increased the value of the homes. So where there is a contribution that's required, generally the home has increased a fair amount in order to reflect now that you're not privately serviced, you're now serviced by a municipal system. Do the individuals who own vacant lots also have to contribute? Absolutely. They are included in the calculations. If there is any damage to our home due to vibration or disturbance from the construction, how is that covered? Once again, I'll call upon Don, perhaps if you can address this question, please.
Yes, as the municipality approaches to construction and as they go through the tendering process and a contractor is selected, it's definitely a requirement on most municipal projects to have a precondition survey of the individual properties. We would certainly encourage people to allow those surveys to be completed. It does sort of look at the existing residents, and it provides a baseline to determine whether there's been any damage caused by the construction or not, which then becomes the responsibility of the contractor. So I think the response to that particular question is just that precondition survey. I will maybe jump to the next question, if I may, Gary, just because I think it's also related to construction. And the question was, would there be access to our properties at all times during the 3 years of construction? Well, I think we've said earlier that the bulk of the construction and the certainly the trenching and the installation of the sewer should occur in one construction season. Access, there needs to be strong coordination with the contractor and the municipality relative to ensuring that there is access to those properties. That will certainly say that construction is always an aggravation, and that it doesn't mean that access is easy, but we have to make sure that access is provided, and people have to get to their homes. So I guess there's two parts to that question. I think the bulk of the construction will not be over a 3-year period, but more over a one construction season. And yes, access is important, and it needs to be coordinated. Do you want me to jump to the next one as well, Gary?
I was going to say, Don, you're on a roll. Why don't you? So 28 has the township approached the MTO about allowing access to the subdivision off the highway and including streetlights?
Yes, and I think the township has had considerable experience relative to Highway 26, both on the eastern approach to the Stainer community as well as the northern approach on 26 north to the Stainer community. And the township has dealt with the MTO on a number of different projects relative to access and encroachment and trying to get services onto the highway. And certainly the current intersection where the hub accesses Highway 26 was a very difficult approval to get at the time that the emergency hub was constructed, for example. The ministry has provided comments on the current proposed development by Manortown, and I guess we can just assure the public that getting another access out onto Highway 26 based on those comments and the past relationships is just really a non-starter, and unfortunately.
Thank you. Question 29. On the map that I showed earlier, lot 26 is the developing property. How many homes are in there, and are they paying their $33,740 per household? Absolutely, they're making their contribution, and it's based on 20 single detached equivalents. So that development has been assessed that the flows are equivalent to 20 single family homes, and they'll be charged appropriately. Are these works going to benefit the entire township, and are these works only going to benefit new development? Now, as we've noted, the distribution of the cost is based on the benefits received from the sewers the sewer works being undertaken. When you take a look at these developments, allowing the servicing, allowing for additional development within the area, and I think we talked the equivalent of 151 homes, that generates additional property taxes, and that benefits the rest of the municipality. They generate more homes that'll contribute to the water rates, and more homes that contribute to the wastewater rates. So there is a broader benefit. There's the works that allow for those developments to occur, but then the funds that are raised are actually enhancing the contributions back to the municipality, with respect to property taxes, water rates, and sewer rates. Why is Manortown, so the last question is, why is Manortown not paying for the full cost as they are the prime benefactor of the project? And I think that what the key word here is they're the prime benefactor. They're not the only. As we look to
Can you hear me speak now? Okay. It looks like Gary logged off. He's probably going to log back in. He had something happen with his computer, so we'll just wait a minute for him to come back on. We apologize for the technical difficulties.
There he is.
Sorry about that. I got dropped. I'm not sure what happened there, but I do apologize. So I think the last question, I'm not sure if I fully answered it, but so I was talking about Manortown, and they are moving towards them, and the other developing landowners are paying their fair share. You have to keep in mind that there's legislation in place. The legislation sets out a level of equity between developing landowners and between existing landowners. We have to respect the legislation. We could be cavalier and say, no, you pay 100%. What happens then is that we would be taken to the Ontario Land Tribunal, what used to be called the Ontario Municipal Board. We would have we would be challenged, appealed, and when you do that, then these calculations are solely in the hands of the board member. And in my experience, different people can present different levels of equity. We've laid out these costs to the developing landowners. They have thought that it's an equitable cost sharing, and I don't believe there would be any challenge to what we provided here. So from our experience, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've been before the board, on probably 45 occasions, and these are the principles on which we work with. So we've applied them here, and I think it's what the board would expect to be an equitable distribution. So I think that's the end of my presentation, and then the questions. And Sasha, I think I'm going to take a break from speaking, and I think you have some individuals who wanted to provide some commentary.
We do. Thank you very much, Gary. So our first public participant is Jean Hogg. I'm just going to promote her as a panelist, and then I'll ask her to turn on her microphone and her video. So just bear with me. Hi, Jean. You're a participant now. You can turn on your camera and your microphone.
Unmute.
We can hear you, Jean. There you
Are
go.
you getting? You got it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just need some clarification on the sewer size. You talk about the upsizing of the sewers. And my question is sort of twofold. Is is all the sewer being upsized or just the part up by Phillip Street? And if you were to just put the sewers to the 77 homes, would the sewers need to be upsized just for us going on it versus all the further development?
I think that's a question for Don, please.
A good question, Jean. Certainly the existing sewers are the sewers that are on Phillip Street and that short section of orange sewer that is on Sunnidale Street.
Right.
And those sewers are being upsized to accommodate the flows that are anticipated from both the existing and development lands. I would have to, don't know that there was a calculation to determine the capacity of that existing sewer relative to the 77 existing homes. We can undertake to provide you an answer in that regard. I would take the opportunity that for everybody that's online and listening, that Jennifer Georges of our office is the project manager for this project. And it's her regret that she was not able to be on this PIC virtual meeting tonight. She would probably have that at the top of her head. I don't. And but we can certainly undertake to provide that for you.
Thank you.
And Mike may have an answer for it, actually.
Don't have the answer. So the pipe had to be upsized and deepened. So the pipe on Phillip Street is very shallow, and it wouldn't accept extra sewage. I think part of the question, Gene, was if we just put a pipe in for the 77 homes, unfortunately, just due to the lay of the land, so whether it's 77 homes or 20 homes, we had to build a pump station because the sewer by gravity can only flow to the east down towards the timber mark.
Right.
So we would have to build a gravity sewer and a pump station and a force main, regardless of how many were in there.
Thank you.
Jean, do you have any other questions or is that all?
The only other one, and it really is probably, hopefully, a separate meeting, talking to other people on the street, nobody's discussing or telling us the cost, and I know it will vary house to house to put it in, but to be honest, I'm trying to figure out, is it $500 or $50,000 to put the sewers from the street to the house? So I'm thinking that hopefully there will be some sort of information session on that as well.
So I can talk to that. I mean, we've had recent experience with this. Obviously, if you're close to the road, the costs are less. If you're farther away from the road, the costs are more because you have to have the pipe,
Right.
size it, etc. On average, we've used a cost of $5,000. $5,000.
Is that to get it in the house and all the work done?
That's from the experience we've had recently. That's to decommission the septic system and then take the pipe and bring it to the road. Now, most of these properties are privately serviced, which means a lot of times they're well set back from the road. I'm not quite sure. I know some municipalities have assisted landowners, and it also depends on whether you're doing individual. You're just calling up Bob, the sewer guy, and having him do it for you, or whether the municipality assists, but the municipality cannot issue the tender. But the municipality can assist the landowners potentially to collectively put out for some form of bidding so that the landowners can benefit from a collective agreement. Now, I haven't talked to the municipality about that. That's just my experience in working with other municipalities. And that would be something where they would assist, but the municipality cannot issue the tender. Okay,
No.
it's not, they're private lands, but they can assist you in moving ahead to, the best thing to do is if somebody's got, 77 properties, that's, you get the economies of scale for coming in and doing all these properties at once. So it's something we can pursue more, but there's actually a lot of different conditions there that play into those cost factors.
Okay, thank you. That's everything. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
Our next participants are Diane and Gary Russell. I'm just going to promote them as panelists, so just bear with me. Hi, Diane and Gary. You guys are participants now. You can turn on your microphone and your camera.
And there we are.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. There we go. Sorry. I just wanted to say tonight, with all these costs mentioned, that how it affects the lives of the people on the street, regarding those who can't afford the costs, even with the proposed payment plan mentioned, and some of these people will have to sell their homes, they can't afford it. But what I want to propose because of this as well I have two comments regarding two options. The first being not to urbanize the street with the 2.8 million that's set aside for the urbanization of the street. Could that not cover the 2.6 million that the residents have to pay? And this way they'll only have to worry about the concerns of decommissioning their septic systems and connecting to the sewer line. And the other one is having learned that the fire department is fully serviced, could the services not exit out the north side of the Manortown development rather than come down Sunnidale Street? And that's all I have to say. And my husband, did you want to add something?
Yes, I would. In the April 26th meeting, now that the town's paying for urbanization, the amount which was presented was $5.8 million. In the August 18 meeting, the cost changed to $2.8 million. Why the big change? And nothing has changed. They're still doing storm sewers, sidewalks, street lights, curbs and gutters. Why the big change? That's a drastic amount. $2.5 million. Also, there was a direct development contribution in the April 26th presentation of $997,500 from the developer. Where did that money go?
So I'll answer, I guess, Gary's questions, and then I think Mike, perhaps Mike or Don could answer Diane's. So as I say, the original presentation was a first cut at the numbers to take the results of the EA and to put them forth to council with some preliminary calculations. We had to do from, obviously some more detailed analysis, as I talked about. We went in more granularly to separate, the I area from the other areas and to look specifically at the individual properties that would be flowing into these. With respect to the roads has been now deemed 90% developer funded, and there is a contribution which would be made from property taxes. That's part of the urbanization fund. We've reviewed that project relative to the I guess the the funding principles that have been set up for that reserve fund, and it meets with the requirements of council. So that is being removed from being a direct cost and is being funded in part by that special fund that's been set up, and then 90% by the development community. Mike, you or Dawn, I think there's Diane's questions.
Yeah, I can take those, Don, if you want, or you can, either way. And also to Gary's point about the urbanization costs changing. We've worked very hard with RJ Burnside and Watson's to try to make this, I want to say painless, but I know that's not a good word. So when we added the water main into this in April, we didn't really consider the water main. So we added the water main into this, but part of the above the water main is part of that road cost. So before the urbanization was the entire road. And then when we add the water main, we take a portion of that road cost and put it towards the water main, and then it's picked up through the water rates. To answer Diane's questions, the $2.5 million to urbanize, that's not sitting somewhere aside. That's a development charge on all new properties. So as new businesses and buildings, as they build, they pay a development charge. So that 2.5 million, 90% of that is paid because of places like Manortown. All new houses, they pay a development charge. So
Yeah,
really the only money coming from the township taxes, the urbanization is about 260,000, I think was the number. So that's all that would be available. And that's specifically for urbanizing. So as these roads get busier, we have sidewalks for our children, drainage, so we don't have ditches filling with water.
Excuse me for interrupting, Mike. I just wanted to say, is it something that needs to be done now? Could that not be done in a couple of years when there are more homes built, more contribution, with tax amounts paid, rates paid, and things like that? Is this something that needs to be done right away?
Yeah, and as the director of public works, we don't want to come back and rip yards up and roads up. And like, this is something we've done as a whole. It's very complicated, complex. But when we do a street, we want to do it all and be done with it. Doing it all is going to save money. If we put a sidewalk in a tender for a contractor that's already there with heavy equipment and gravel and all those other things they need, adding a sidewalk isn't a lot of extra work. If we have to issue a separate tender, it's actually going to increase the cost because they have to mobilize, they have to get separate insurance. It becomes a separate contract. We have to have new inspectors. If that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense, but it still kind of doesn't really answer the point. It doesn't, I know what you're saying, you're saving a cost now, but we're talking about a huge expense, a huge burden on the residents that need to pay this. Could those monies not cover the costs that we have to pay for urbanization?
So they are, like, you're not paying for urbanization. Sunnidale Street existing residents are not paying for the urbanization.
I understand that. The money that is, on your chart, it shows X amount of dollars for urbanization alone that we are not paying. But what I'm proposing is not to urbanize now and to put those monies towards the costs that the residents are expected to pay.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer the fire department question. I'm going to let Kelly or Gary answer the DC related question because they're the financial folks. So the question about using the sewer line that the emergency hub uses, that emergency hub, the sewer system there was designed specifically for that building. So it's only designed for, I think there's a kitchen and maybe 3 washrooms or 4 washrooms in that building. So it's a very small, like a type of pump station, but the size of maybe, a car, and a small pump and about a 1-inch line or a 1.5-inch line that runs up the boulevard of Highway 26 to a sewer manhole. As Don McNulty mentioned, we had to work very hard in order to get that allowance from the MTO. They're not going to allow us to put a sewer main or a force main under that highway. And that system is only designed for that building. So it's just not an option. We looked at lots of different scenarios, and the one that we've presented tonight is really the best we can come up with, and it works. And I'll pass it back to Gary for the other.
Can I just say something again as well? Sorry. You are putting in the sewers in the street now, Sunnidale Street. You're doing all the preparation so you don't have to kind of redig later, right? You're going to prepare for all the developments. So the sewer that was placed in 26, why was that not done? Why, for the sewer line coming down to the fire department, why would it not, why would a larger one, you're saying there's a small one in place, not be put in there so it wouldn't have to be redone?
Oh, certainly. So when I say it's sized for the building, that would be the equivalent of about 4 houses. So if we tried to build a pump station big enough for 300 houses, it wouldn't work properly. So when I say, so the sewer line from the emergency hub is about 1.5 inches in diameter, about the size of a water bottle. And the sewer main that's going to come out of the pump station on Sunnidale Street is about 6 inches across. So, about the size of a football. You can't put a small flow through a large pump station. It just doesn't work. So the pump stations are sized, the force mains are sized within a percentage of the design flow for that pump station. We couldn't have built a pump station and a force main to serve the entire southeast corner of Stayner when we were only designing a sewer system for a single building.
Okay, one more question then. When the design for the fire department was placed or proposed to the town, was the development at the same time proposed to the town? Like, was there knowledge of a development going in there to accommodate them?
So Sunnidale Estates has been a development on the books. That area has been a development on the books prior to my starting with the township in 1997. So all of this work is driven by developers. Manortown has come to the township. They're ready to go. They have draft plan approval on a subdivision. So we have to accommodate and make it work. That didn't happen until 2019. We'd already, that might have been 2018, but certainly not when the emergency hub was built. There was no indication that the owners of that property were waiting to develop. And Don has something there.
I might be able to add a little bit on behalf of the municipality on this. And certainly the hub has been there for quite a number of years now. And certainly at the time of the construction of the emergency hub, there really wasn't any actively proposed developments in the southeast area of Stayner at that time. Mike did mention the Sunnidale Estates, which is now Manortown, and it surfaced as a possible development probably in the 1990s or maybe even earlier than that. And it was proposed originally to be partially serviced, which means it was going to have municipal water, but it was going to have private systems or septic systems. So very similar to you folks on Sunnidale Street. And but the ability to do that has really been changed by provincial policy statements now. And so provincial policy statements really require municipalities to have full servicing meaning water and sewer provided to new developments. So that originally what was called Sunnidale Estates, now called Manortown, needed to revisit that, needed to consider full servicing if they wanted to proceed. And in fact, any future development in that area will have to proceed on the basis of full servicing. And then that really then provided the opportunity to look at how to service that whole southeast corner of Stayner.
And if I could just answer your question, I think the question was, can we take the cost from the roads and use that money to subsidize or pay for the existing residents portion of the work? When we get into development charges, there's a piece of legislation. And the legislation says that when we create these costs, we parcel them by individual services. So we identify the roads, we identify the water related works, the sewers, and these have to be used towards growth portion of the projects. It would be in contravention of the legislation to just take that money and apply it towards a purpose that it wasn't originally intended for. You do that type of thing, once again, we find ourselves before the board. In that particular case, I don't believe we'd be successful. And so even though it sounds like it's money that can just be allocated, actually under the legislation, they're very succinct on what the money can be used for. So in simple terms, no, we cannot take that money for the road and just apply it against the cost of the sewers. It cannot happen.
So in the March 8th meeting, part 2, most of the councillors were against urbanization. So I don't know what they're going to do, but that's what I got from that, watching that video. Also, did you answer the direct development contribution, $997,500 from Manortown?
So the direct contribution, I'd have to go back and take a look, but if we had an allocation for direct contribution, that would be more for a cost associated with the localized works. So if you look at the more detailed calculations that we gave to council, we've parceled and we've broken it apart based on the legislation. We probably called it direct developer contributions, but that's under a certain section of the legislation on how we would collect that money. So we've parceled it based on all the different pieces of legislation, and that's what that money is. In what we presented to you earlier, we've just summarized it towards developer related costs, what would be recoverable from these properties, and then what's being recovered through property taxes or water rates. So we didn't go into all the details. We just summarized them at the higher level for you. But those numbers that I presented before are in those numbers that I presented tonight.
So the new pumping station has increased $827,000 from April 26th. Why is that?
Well,
New pumping station enforcement.
so can I make a suggestion? You have many questions. We're more than happy to answer them. We're 2 hours into the presentation. We have 7 different people. If there's a continuing, if you want reconciliation between costs and such, honestly, I don't have both presentations in front of me. I'm more than happy. If you want to go through a detailed reconciliation, we're more than happy to provide it. I don't have everything in front of me, so I'm doing it from memory. So it becomes a little bit more challenging for me to be 100% accurate. My memory is not that good from 5 weeks ago, what I presented, and then the numbers. So more than happy, Gary, if you want to put this in an email, we're more than happy to put that reconciliation of the cost for you, if that.
Okay. I just have one more. It's not about, there are numerous new developments being built in Stayner. This will contribute to taxes, wastewater rates, and water rates, millions of dollars. There's lots of homes going in Stayner. I think there's over 2,000. There's 1,500 in Ashtown Meadows, 900 at McPherson, 81 down the road. Why should we pay for sewers? Growth pays for growth.
And I think I explained that when we go through, because of legislation, and like under the Development Charges Act, there's over 70 clauses with a whole bunch of sub clauses. There's regulations behind it. There's 150 Ontario Municipal Board cases that set case precedent. All of those move towards distributing the costs on a benefits received basis. If the suggestion is you're the straw that broke the camel's back, or you're initiating it, so you should pay 100%. That's a wonderful goal, but that's not how the legislation guides us. So if we did that type of thing, I think we would find ourselves very quickly being appealed. And if we're being appealed, then you're leaving it to a board member to now, and whatever the development community present versus what we present, we would at best end up at where we're at right now. At worst, there could be some other way of presenting the information. We've sat down with the landowners, presented the calculations. They assess that it's fair way of distributing the costs, and that's how we've laid it out. So plain and simple, we have legislation that guides us. If we want to contravene it, you put yourselves at risk at being taken to the tribunals.
We also heard from a source that the developer wanted to put in their own wastewater system at a lesser cost. Why can't this be an option? And there's about 7 or 8 systems like this down in the city of Vaughan.
Okay, so I understand this is the last question, and then we can move on to some of the other residents. Any other questions, please? You've got lots of questions. Please put them in writing. We're more than happy, but as I say, we're 2-hour mark. Be nice to we have 7 other individuals. So Don, can you answer the last question? And then perhaps we can.
I'll just go back very quickly to a previous question about cost estimates. And I think anybody that's been in the construction business over the last year has just truly been impacted with crazy increases in construction costs. Partially lumber costs, which are up 40-50%. Steel prices have just shot through the roof as well. So the change in the estimates are just our best efforts to get the best information before council and before yourself as ratepayers and before the developers as developers as to what the cost of this infrastructure will be. And so the estimates were updated, taking into account those increase in material costs and based on current existing projects around the province, around Ontario, that have been impacted by those prices. So, and we hope it's enough. But as Gary said earlier, I think that the maximum increase you would see was 2%. So.
Thank you, Diane and Gary. So what you can do is you can email me directly and I can send your questions to Gary Scanlon and he can have them answered for you. And it was great to see your additional family member join the meeting.
Thank you, Sasha. And
Thank
we'll
you.
certainly do that.
Thank you. So the next public participant I'm going to bring in is Brad Dennison. I understand that he also has other people with him. So I'm going to bring Brad in as a participant. Just one moment, please. Hi, Brad, you're now a participant. You can turn on your microphone and your camera. Hi, Brad, we can see you.
Hi there, folks. How are you doing? I just want to talk about page 7, and that's the allotment for developer portion, the portion for existing properties, and then the tax and that rate portion. And my math is 21%, which is close to 2.6, 8 million at 65% for Manortown, and then through the rates comes out to about 13.4%. That's 1.6 million. We do pay water. Is that included in that 2.6 of our portion, or is that on top of that?
The slide, the waterworks that was 757,000. That's included. That's being funded as part of the water rates. So there have been, there's been provided in the capital budget for, an apportionment of this water main to be paid for by the water rates. So as I say, development charges, this is being replaced and then being upsized. Development charges allows for us to pay for a portion of it. And that's where we'd be looking for paying approximately 850,000 through the developer contributions, and then about 750,000 through the water rates.
Okay, so as it stands now, if I'm looking at this, so me as a resident on Sunnidale Street, I'm putting in for a capital investment for 21% for the sewer line to go down our street. The town, this is going to be your asset as well, correct? And then we've got Manor Town Homes that's going to benefit this, of course. And my thinking on this, the day that system goes down the street and we hook up to that asset, that's when you're starting to get your payback. The payback for Manor Town, of course, is for those homes. That could be distributed through the cost and the sale of those homes. They can get that back for their asset. Again, the town, your asset, the day that we hook up, you get that plus all super or further development. But we're paying 21% of that asset. We're going to finance that over 20 years. That's going to cost me $2,268 on top of my taxes for 20 years. I'm going to borrow on that. But I get nothing back from that asset. The town does. It benefits Manor Town. They can recoup costs. That's not my capital cost, but I've got ownership on that 21% of that. Can you help me out with that math? Because we have to take a loan on that for 20 years. I'm coming up to 70 years and 10. I don't have 20 years left. That is a big, big cost. Can somebody help me just with that? Who's benefiting rather? The town, Manor Town, of course, we as a ratepayer. This is a big burden for this town. It's a bigger burden for us, I think, percentage-wise.
So, and as I've indicated, the long-term plan of the municipality is to move towards all of the properties within the urban area to be serviced with water and wastewater. Part of the initiatives are to address environmental issues over the longer term, septic systems at different stages in their useful life. They function and then they have a lower level of functionality. I mean, that's something Don can talk about. At some point, there is a requirement to replace, refurbish, enhance existing septic systems. So this is an earlier cost. That's correct. Potentially over time, this is a cost which you may have to incur. As I say, I'm 22 years down the road. I live in a similar type of property that doesn't have municipal septic. A neighbor of mine had to replace the septic system. I'm saying, so that's part of the philosophy of moving towards municipal urbanization.
I understand and accept that. And I've heard feedback on what septics cost. And I don't agree with those costs. If you maintain your septic, it's a good running system. As far as to replace that cost, the costs are way out of line on that. The thing that troubles me is, and again, am I buying in my 21% for that line to run down our house? That's a capital asset for the town. It's a definite benefit for Manor Town that will, and I'm saying it again, they can get a payback. I don't get a payback on that. I have to pay for that for 20 years. Is that not a, how can that be a cap? Where does my payback come back in, other than having the right to hook onto that sewer? And I get that. But there's nothing been said about the decommissioning, what we have to pay for that. And for some of the residents on the street, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money we're absorbing. So I guess my point being, like, we have a high burden to pay for this. And I get why. But to pay for that over 20 years and it just, at my time in life, and we've got young people in the street, that is an awful lot of money. That's a lot of money we have to try to pay for. I think with our other services for our town, if it were to be our hydro network, and I see the people working on Huron Street, and that's for future development. I know they're increasing the size of their lines and whatnot. And if our hydro, EPCOR, went along that street and say, we're upsizing that, okay, for future demand, and this is what it's going to cost each of you people, that comes into the rates. To me, that comes into our rates. And when I think of the people on this street, and my wife's family's been here since the 40s, they have paid taxes on Sunnidale Street since 1940. Where has that tax money gone in those years to support the urbanization of the street? I think it went into the whole of the sum. But that sum should have been the development on here. So, and we've got many residents on the street that have been here for 30 years. They've paid taxes on. Where does that go to help for urbanization? I would like to, it's costs, and I've taken this off of our Clearview Township. And this is a census for 2016, population 14,151. It's based on an average household of 2.6 people. Average value of the house is $413,000. The median household income is $78,519. The median population is 45.3 years. So excuse me, I have to just have a little drink. That income of $78,519. I'm just trying to get a little benchmark here, because the demographics here is young people starting out, with people in the middle, of course, halfway through their career, and then we have seniors. So the median income and the tax rate at 25.4% is $19,917. For that person to buy a home, and we have young couples buying homes on our street, that figure was $413,000. It's not hard for people in entry-level homes, $500,000 to service that debt with a $350,000 mortgage at 3%, amortized over 25 years. And I'm just going to say monthly expenses to service that debt for that year is $19,916.88. They'll have a car. They have to have a car. There's home, car insurance, food, clothing, fuel, heating, electric, municipal taxes, cell, internet, TV, entertainment. The cost for that family, and I'm using a family, I'm not taking the 2.6, family of 4 is $45,212.88 to live for that year. If you take that money and subtract that from their take-home pay, they have $13,389 left at the end of that year. to service that debt, for this street is $2,268. So now that brings that income for that family down to $11,121 for the year. That's the net money that they have left over. What's the net money left for? Could it be for RSPs? Could it be for education plans? Could it be to buy a newer car? There's people that commute on this street. Home repairs. Do their children play hockey? College, university. So that family's going to take on 20 years of debt, as I will, as we all will. It is a terrible financial impact. It really is. Now, I made that example, and I can do that. I can do that for seniors. I've got figures, and it's cost of living. It's what we have to get by on. And as a senior, that cost for me might be we have children, and they're in their 30s, and they're trying to get into the break into the home. So we know we got support to give there. And it's hard at this age. It's hard to take on that debt load. It really is. And I get it. You're talking about municipal. And I know there's bylaws. I don't understand that language. But I think for a municipality, and if you look, and Gary said earlier, and it's hard for me to comprehend. And I remember in earlier council meetings, you talked about front end debt loading, and we can't afford it. That mathematics doesn't, I'm not getting that, because I'm thinking the growth in Stainer, that income that you can, if you have a business plan for you not to secure money, for you not to be able to get that, and you can prove what's already existing, what's coming online, what's on your books, you're going to generate, like, how can you not afford front end loading? That's a point of that's a part of doing business. And yet to me, it's getting passed down to me. And that, to me, that 21%, I'm a big stakeholder in that, and I get nothing back from that, just the right to tap into that source. And council, I hope our councillors, again, the demographics here is all the spectrum, young, we got people in the middle and people at the end of that. We're people like you. We're people just like you. We have children and grandchildren to look forward to. And I'm taking on debt load now. I want to get it. I just finally got out of a mortgage in my 60s. And you're expecting, I want a mortgage for another 20 years? But you have the capability to for that asset to grow and put money back. I'm really heartfelt here, and it boggles my mind. And you can talk about legislation, but the bottom line is the debt load is going to the people that are presently paying taxes, have paid taxes. And I feel that my taxes have gone into the whole of our township. Now, is it not time for that to come back to help people in our community and on this street? The impact is too much. It's too much. And I don't expect anybody, I do not expect anybody to try to answer that question. I really don't. But I look at that, and I looked at the form of communication from the time, the key points, all the key dates from when this started in 2018. And I went to the council meeting. I'm thinking, good for Stainer. We've got growth. We have people coming in here that's going to share the community, be part of the community, and pay to that community. And then what happened between then and where we were? And on May 6th, I find out about this fees that we have to pay for, $28,000, $16,000. I thought, and I know I had an opportunity to be part of that process, but we have COVID, we we're in lockdown. I think, where did this come from? Where did this come from? We have seniors on this street, and I made figures. And I talked about a median income. Let's do the math for somebody who's living on CPP and old age security. We have people on the street. And the math for that is quite, well, it's around 27,000. I've lost my paperwork. And then there's some tax on that. There's not much left by the time that person lives to take on a debt load of 21% over 20 years. And I hope and I pray for this system to look at the reality of this, to look at the people that is on our street.
So through this
Something not right.
So through this process, is exactly, why council wants us to go out and communicate with the people. And part of the feedback is what we go back and talk to council about. I think, your numbers are, if you would document them, I think they're very compelling for us to look at and to consider. I think they're very valid perspectives. There are contributions that are being made, some of the money coming back to the infrastructure that's being constructed. I think we're hearing you clearly saying, we pay taxes over a longer period of time. Should there be more contributions that come back to reduce the burden on the existing ratepayers? And, I think we've heard you clearly. I think you've got, I think as you've noted, you've done some calculations. I think we would like to see those calculations, and we will pass that on and make sure that information is available to council as part of this process. You have super valid concerns, and that's why we're out here is to hear from the individuals.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. And really the calculations I'd like to do, I would like to do that on a 6-figure income of 100,000. I would like to do that on if it was a defined pension plan. I would like to do that also. We have people that work in manufacturing on this street. The people on this street, and I'm using $30. I understand that Honda, our workers at the top rate is $30 to $32. I'll do it for $30, just like I did our median income, okay, on Clearview site, okay?
Yep.
And I think that's the human factor in this. That's the human element.
Well, I think you're providing us with additional information in order to make those decisions. And I think that's why we were reaching out. I mean, somebody such as yourself is presenting it in a couple of different ways for us, or for ultimately for council to consider this particular project, which is right now it's a project under consideration.
So I thank you, and I appreciate it. We have, who do you have on behalf? The other thing with the virtual here, we have people that aren't on computer, okay? And really, who can I put on next? I have Pat Waldy, and Pat Waldy is, I'll have to get her to sit here, okay? So she's just gonna come over and.
Thank you, Brad. You can bring Pat on and we'll listen.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you, councillors. I don't know much about all this, what's going on tonight as far as figures, but I'm going to tell you from my heart, we've been here 34 years. We're over 70 and on a fixed income. To burden us with this huge debt at our age, or for that matter, at any age, is totally unfair. Hopefully they can reduce this cost substantially. So if we sell our home, which we probably all have to do, we'll have to pass this huge debt on to the new homeowners, making our home less saleable. If the developers want it, then they'd have to pay for it, because I can't afford to. And at my age, if I have to give up my home, that's very, very sad for my family and everybody else on this street. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
I have, do I have someone else? Can I?
Yeah,
I'm
yes,
sorry,
Brad,
this is your
I believe,
process, Nash, I'm sorry.
no, I believe Carmen Wright is probably present
Okay.
at your house as well.
Okay, Karen, could you just, like, just from your heart, just talk from your heart, Carmen. You don't have to, no question, just talk from your heart. Could I have permission to help Carmen out here? Carmen's lived, you've lived on, the street for
32 years.
32 years, Carmen, and
Yeah.
and so, and I hope council's watching this. When I saw those figures and the impact of what's happening to our street, and I went to talk to Carmen and I said, Carmen, do you understand the impact? That's when it was 28,000 and 16,000 for urbanization. And when I asked him, have you heard anything about it? And do you remember what?
Well, I said that's more than what I made on the farm.
And
And I kind of, that's not very much, and I can't afford this bill. And I'm over 80, and I don't know.
okay, okay, are you okay? I know you. Okay, thank you.
And he just lost his wife.
Oh,
Thank you,
yeah,
Carmen.
I think that's the other thing that's happening on our street. We have widowers on our street. And it's hard. It's hard. And Carmen has just been recently widowed, and there's someone else that I think that who's on my list for talking would be Marilyn McNeil. And on Marilyn's behalf, her daughter Elizabeth is here. And would you like to?
Thanks, Brad. Yes, hi, good evening, council. So my name's Elizabeth. I'd like to speak on behalf of my mother, Marilyn McNeil, who resides at 259 Sunnidale. Firstly, I'd like to say that we recently lost my dad, and my father loved the town of Stainer. He just cherishes it, just thinks people are wonderful. Can't say enough good things about everybody here. When my parents were looking to buy in this area, that was some 20 years ago, they were looking to buy either Wasaga Beach, Collingwood, or Stainer. And the main thing being cost. My dad was very cost savvy, and he looked at all the numbers, and it made estimations about anticipated future costs of increased taxes. But they decided to move to Stainer based on the lower taxes compared to Wasaga Beach or Collingwood. And he certainly hadn't anticipated his taxes to going up 50% with this new proposal. My mother's not against this new project. However, the cost is something, still there's unknown costs. And like Brad said, the burden to the residents, it's disproportionate. It's affecting more than others. And even the understanding of the process is hard for the young or old. Some understand it more. So my mother recently also paid $10,000 to upgrade her driveway, and her frontage is 100 feet. She also has the McIntyre Creek running through her property. So in addition to the increased taxes, there's an unknown cost that she's being asked to decide what to do in the next year. So I just wanted to share with you today the impact to her, the stress and worry to a 75-year-old new widower, unsure of how to navigate this process. So my question is to you today. I have one question for you. She's concerned with this 1-year window. Why is there only a 1-year window for her to make this decision? At this time, she doesn't know what the cost is going to be for her to hook up with this 100-foot properties she has. I think she's going to be looking at sizable cost or even what NVA might be saying as well. There's just so much unknown and great stress and concern and worry to my mother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, staff, I thank you for your knowledge. I appreciate the if my teacher was watching here, I'd call it arithmetic. And Mr. Scanlon, being a layman, and I look at some of your figures and they're fixed costs, right? And I see that. I would really like to see if, and you're saying I could bring in a report. I'd like to see the numbers of some of where your numbers are. And I'm going to say I guess my teacher would say if you have your math, you might not have the final answer correct, but if you can show the math, I can understand it. And I'm just looking at fixed numbers, and I'd like to look at a few more of those numbers. But anyways, I'm just very. I get what council's trying to do. We have development. I get for our town, and I'm happy and I'm pleased as a citizen of our town of progress. And I'll say again, it's a very big debt load for us residents, and I'll just cut it off at that. Thank you very much. And may I? Okay, there's one other person. That's my neighbor Scott McNabb. Scott had come over. Did he, Sasha, did he get, he wanted to, he sent in for, he wanted to make a statement. Would he be allowed to do that if he didn't have that process for him to be? So Scott McNabb.
Brad, is Scott at your house right now?
And Scott's here because he tried to get onto the site. He was having trouble with his, logging on to the site. Would he be able to talk?
Sure, yeah.
Okay,
Come on
thank
the
you.
screen.
Hello. How are you guys tonight?
Good, thank you.
Okay, I'll make it kind of short, and I just wanted to say my little part in all this little thing. Yeah, I live 238 Sunnidale Street, right next to Brad and Kathy. Basically, I know everybody's has an individual, their lifestyles are based on their income, of course, I'm retired, 4 years and I'm working on my 4th year now. I'm a widower, so I only have one income coming in. I have a daughter that just finished university, 5 years, trying to help her out. And I have a son that just finished high school, and he's talking about going off to school as well next year. So yeah, this is going to be a huge burden for a person for myself, being, having to face and deal with all these financial burdens, and to put that extra on top of me, it's going to be a fight of my life, basically, to manage all this extra income that I have to put out for this, and it's going to be a burden. Definitely going to be a burden for me. I retired early, but when I retired early, before I retired, I calculated everything for myself when I retired. And this, of course, is not part of my retirement. This is like getting hit by a Mack truck. You're coming down the highway and you don't foresee it coming. And so here I am having to deal with this extra burden, and I have 2 kids that I have to look after and trying to help them out as well in life. Brad had already kind of said something about that tonight with certain individuals that on our street that have to deal with certain things. So this is kind of part of that scenario. So that's my scenario that I'm living with. And I mean, this is when this was all brought up and the numbers started to come out, it's like, what the heck? Are you kidding me? This is not part of, this was never part, I never put any of this in, was never part of my retirement scenario. I mean, being where I am, I mean, being one income, and wife passed away. So I mean, that's one income that I have to deal with now. And now I have to deal with, you know, the son going off to college, and that's a burden in itself, because I already put a daughter through 5 years of university, and I already know what the cost factors are in all of that. And so anyway, that's my part in the whole thing. And I just thought I'd at least let you guys know, you know, how it is. And it's life, but I would, hopefully you guys could look at this and use this for hopefully future scenarios for people that are having to struggle through all this sort of thing. And I mean, I'm totally disagreement with the whole thing. And anyway, I said my part, and I'll give it back to Brad now. Okay, thank you for listening to me.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, that I have reams of things I'd like to try to get out. Thank you for the insight. This is a very, very big impact for the people on Sunnidale Street. And when people are under any form of duress, human nature, the defense that they have for that is flight or fight. And
Right.
I think that's an element here.
Well, I appreciate it, and I thank you for coordinating the other individuals, because once again, this is part of, you know, receiving the input from the property owners. Obviously, what council is directed right now is for us to go out and communicate, and hearing from you was great. You've got some statistics or some calculations, which, you know, we certainly welcome. Please put it in writing and submit it, because it will be part of the information that we'll review, and also which council will have before them. So thank you for coordinating things. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Brad. Now I'll bring in the next participants, and that's Bruce Rutledge and Monica Leslie. So just bear with me. Hi, Bruce. You're now a participant. You can turn on your microphone and your camera.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and everyone else for stepping up and bringing their information forward. I don't want to repeat myself or repeat what others have said already this evening, but I think you get the consensus that we're all concerned from different levels, different angles. We were all at a different spot. But I think we all have a plan. We had a plan, and this is a major change in the plan. Like, I want to basically just a few things. I mean, there's a lot of good work on lowering it down to the 33.7. That was good work to absorb the urbanization costs. I think we're almost there. Like, if we can find, I was trying to look on online. I'm not the computer savvy guy. That's why I have my assistant beside me here. And I couldn't find much on manor town developments. And I know there's legislation and all that. I'm aware of some of it, obviously not fluent in it, but I know we can't, it's not as easy as raising the cost of those homes, but I mean, just those 80 homes alone, people are overbidding on stuff. $30,000 for each one of them we wouldn't even be talking about this. I know it's critical, a decision for the town. Growth is key, but with growth comes change, and sometimes that change needs to carry itself. We're on a budget. We have a plan, like most homeowners or just people in general. And now we have two new fixed incomes, or not incomes, expenses that will be taken on, be it obviously the taxes and the water bills and that, not to mention the septic. I'm not sure that $5,000 for everything for the hookup.
Yeah.
With all that, I don't see that in the cards. But and also the concern of putting things back to current state how they are. I don't know if the city's planning on bringing the pipe up the center of my property, the left of my property, the right of my property. I don't know how gravity is gonna feed it from the back of my house to the front. I know that's a lot of unknowns, and where to get that information, I guess, is a key takeaway for me. So I can work that budget again and go back. Yeah, and the permitting and all that, but refinancing, going back to the well again, kids in university, kids in college, that's not part of the plan. I knew there was gonna be some development coming, just the number seems pretty high. I do understand the legality. I do understand the dynamic. I'm just basically hoping you can go back to the drawing board on some things and find a way to support the cause for, think of your grandmother, think of your mother, think of your daughter trying to survive, like the nowadays with working full-time, going to school full-time, trying to make ends meet, the stress levels of that, trying to save yourself $200,000 to get into the market and buy a home. I mean, the pressures today are definitely different than what they were before, but there's still pressure. And I have a bunch of new questions with the information I learned tonight, like even the 77 of us will say, I guess there's 20 in that one property that they're thinking on developing. The 20, I think it's halfway down the street. I don't think those 20 numbers are in the cart. Is that in the number of 77? Because I mean, that's like 675,000 right there. Is that in the numbers of us 77, those 20 units on that one property? Yeah. Yeah.
Depending on, honestly, Bruce, I'm not quite sure which property, but if it's the one that was referenced in that one lot, then yeah, it's slated for 20 single detached equivalents.
Yeah. 260.
Yeah, 264.
Yep.
That's included in the 77 units on Sunnydale Street?
So they're bringing 675 to the table?
I think that's on the growth side.
I'm sorry, you think?
Well, sorry, I haven't got the details. My colleague has the detail. I'm running the presentation.
well.
I haven't got that up, but it's in the overall numbers. Yes.
It's included in the 2.598.
So just give me a minute.
675,000 of that is.
Give me a minute to take a look at it. And
I think the property they're referring to is included in the 151 developing properties.
Okay.
So it's not included in the 77.
Because it's developing.
Gotcha.
It's included in the overall cost share. If we put it over on the 77, it would still work out the math.
Okay, so the developer fees on page 7 of your presentation is not just Manor Town.
No, it isn't.
It's Manor Town and lot 2.
Yeah, all the other lots,
Yeah,
all the gray.
All the
gray lots. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of the unknowns are the scary part for, I guess, myself, because my brain just gets going wild. I couldn't move my pen fast enough earlier when you're answering the 31 questions. A lot of good information coming there. But being the septic's in the back, I'm just trying to, engineering wise, how are they going to locate that? And then usual things are gravity fed, but we have a inner pump system by the look of it that goes to the septic. I mean, I'm thinking long-term, I am repairing that down the line, where if it was normal gravity, it would just disappear on its own. Would I be further ahead to restructure where that is and have you come in the front somewhere and put a spot in that basement for that and restructure my plumbing? Would that be cheaper? These are huge questions. I don't really want to take on that burden, but if it's going to save me $20,000, it might be worth my while. Questions like this. So I've got the information on the email, who to ask, but I don't know if there's somewhere we can get some of this information. Like I got the sump pump shooting out the front. It's about 8 feet from the road, 3 feet below the street level, you could say, with the sidewalk going over top of that. I heard earlier it's going to be worked into the weight or the drainage water. I do understand that. I just trying to visualize it, and it seems a little hard hard to visualize, and then maintenance of that. If that pipe does break, whose responsibility does that lie on? So on and so forth. It just snowballs, right?
So like currently our septic is on the back of our home.
Yep.
How do we get it to the outlet? In the back of our house. We have a 5,000 square foot paved driveway.
Right.
How are we going to possibly get that sewage pipe from the road to the back of our house?
So, I mean, first off, I'm not familiar with the house, but it's
Yeah.
it's something that would have to be looked at by obviously an engineer of, you know, Don's caliber, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I
But
guess
I'm not-
to
Okay,
be
and
included,
that's our concern, is because the township wants us to pay $33,000.
Yep.
As people, we are thinking minimum this cost, just to get it from the road to the outlet at the back of our house. If our driveway has to get ripped up, how much do you think 5,000 square feet of asphalt is going to cost to get replaced? $30,000
No, I understand that.
or just
roughly. Okay, so we're looking at minimum $50,000 to $80,000 after all of this is said and done. And I'm 49 years old. We have children in college that want to go on. We want to go on, and we certainly did not incorporate taking on even a $50,000 debt at this point in time in our life. And I think the township actually needs to take that $33,000 and go to the developer and say, okay, because I've done my research, I cannot find how much those homes are selling for at Manortown online, which tells me they have not been developed yet. So the township needs to take that $33,000 per household that they're going to put on the Sunnidale Street residence. They either need to say, okay, you, Mr. Manortown developer, need to increase your home prices by $15,000, and us, as the Township of Clearview, will increase the property taxes to incorporate the remaining balance, as opposed to putting on our Sunnydale Street residents.
Okay.
I get that we need to pay some, but certainly not $33,000.
which to Gary's point is 21% of something that we're not going to ever see a return on. Which shout out to Gary there, if he needs to sharpen a calculator, come on over and we'll talk about it, because it's a lot of good information that you guys have provided tonight. Those 31 questions answered saved me, I don't know, 10 hours in emails trying to get answers, right? But there's a lot of questions. I think we're not alone, and that's basically all we have at the moment, and we will reach out for sure, and look forward to the next session, and hopefully we can grind that 33,740 down to something more manageable.
And will we be getting answers to all of our questions?
The questions on the servicing from your property, from the
If
house?
we email in, I guess, if we take the time and put it in writing.
Our questions on the $33,000, has the town investigated alternative solutions of going back to the developer and saying, okay, no, you need to increase your home prices that you're going to sell your lots at, and the larger lots that you're providing to buyers, those property taxes are going to be increased by X amount of dollars to make up the deficit.
So as I've noted, this is part of a process. We're hearing you, we're listening. That could be that could be an option. It's something that we're listening to. And
so you haven't investigated that alternative. You've just turned to the residents of the street to pay for that.
Well, I think you're putting words in my mouth now.
No, I'm not actually, but I'm just asking, you just said that you haven't investigated that, so.
All right. So we've heard you.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
mean-
Bruce and Monica. If you guys want to send me an email with some of your questions, I can definitely transfer them on to our consultants and get some answers for you.
Thanks very
All
much.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You as well.
Thank you. Our next participants are Joshua and Amy Freeman. So just give me a moment as I move them in as a participant. Hi, Joshua and Amy. You guys can turn on your camera and unmute your microphone. Hello.
Hello. So we are one of the younger couples on the street. We just had a baby. So we just have a few questions as well, because we're in a predicament as well. So with the 33,000, it was said earlier that there's no cost above that. But then we hear about the maybe 2% fluctuation in that, which could potentially go up, plus a maybe $170 building permit. Again, that's a cost to a family. Is there going to be any other fees, like a connection fee or anything like that, if we were to bring the pipe around our house? Because we are in the same boat as Bruce and Monica, where we have a paved driveway that will be probably ripped up so we're not on property lines of our neighbors. And ours is also in the back, so we need to bring it all the way around. Are there other fees that we can expect to see on top of, the 33 plus the 170 for the building permit plus a maybe 2% increase?
No, those are the costs.
Are we going to be getting a full breakdown of what we're like, what it's actually going to cost us? At some point, are we going to see an actual, yes, you do need a building permit at this cost. Yes, there was a 2% increase. Are we going to get these numbers, or is it just going to be here's your bill, have a nice day?
So the question about the building permit there was a question whether that would be charged or waived. And we indicated that, we're taking that under consideration for council. The cost associated with the sewers, we've provided that to you. So those are the costs to them that would be owed to the municipality.
So there's no connection fee if we, like, all of a sudden there's a connection fee because we got the pipe to the road, nothing like that? No,
This cost, what's included in the cost is to put the connection right to your property line. So the connection is included as part of the 33,000. That is the connection fee.
Okay. Legally, do we have to hook up to the sewer system? We have a perfectly good working septic system. Do we need to? Because for us, we're one of the people on the hook for quite a large bill of decommissioning our septic, getting it to the road, ripping up a driveway, ripping out landscaping, things like that.
That's something that would have to be considered. The capital, the 33,000 would have to be
Is paid. We understand that, but
but the other cost that would have to be, we'd have to discuss that with the township. We have not had that discussion.
33,000, and then we got another 40,000. So where do I finance the other 40,000 if I'm already financing 33,000 through you?
plus have a family,
Yes.
have small children.
So we've heard you, what the question, and with an understanding of why you're posing the question is, do you have to hook up immediately, or is that something that can be done?
So it's going forever.
Do we have to hook up at all?
That's a question that we'll have to consider.
Okay.
Okay, we haven't discussed it internally, so. Sorry, Don, did you want to?
I think the timing for hookup is a consideration by each individual municipality in each situation. I would say typically, and this would be a matter then considered by council, typically there would be a time period where hookups are required within a certain period of time, and this is because of the desire to try to decommission those septic systems. And as I said earlier, there is a as desired by the Conservation Authority through source water protection, et cetera, to try to have residents, homes within the built-up settlement area on full services. But it is dependent on a council decision and council direction on timing, and I would say precedent that has already been established within the municipality on other similar projects as well. So I think we need to register the question, and there will have to be some formal decision on that at some point.
The only thing I probably is for Mike, for a sump pump, when it's digging up the street, how is the ditch going to be? Is the ditch going to be open until the storm drain is up and running? In the spring, my sump pump runs every 6 to 8 minutes. And the other day when we had that 120 millimeters of rain, I counted it as 36 seconds. So are you guys going to take the soil out of the street while putting the pipe and fill the ditches in that meantime? Or what are we going to do? Because it's going to go over a year, right?
Well, so that major construction, obviously, if you've dug a hole around there, the amount of water that's in the ground, it just wouldn't be reasonable to try to put sewer pipes in the spring, right? So that heavy duty underground construction, the pipe works will be done through the summer months. The contractor will be required to deal with all the stormwater on the street. So you won't have the spring flows to worry about. Rainfall events will accommodate those. So typically they put the sanitary in first, and they'll come back and put the water main in, or the storm sewer, depending on what works out best for the contractor. So the storm won't be an issue. I think if I could, a lot of questions about the septic decommissioning. The septic decommissioning, when your contractor connects to the pipe, whether if it's out back, basically they cut the pipe off and they put an elbow on it and bring it to the front. That's the very basics of it. But the septic tank, really, you take the lid off, you get it pumped out. That cost is under $500 typically, and then the top gets taken off and it gets filled with dirt. So if there's excess dirt from the trench, your septic tank decommissioning is literally as simple as cutting the pipe off, pumping the tank out, and filling it full of dirt, just to alleviate some, unknowns on that. I think that's got to help. And then you're putting in a 4-inch pipe by gravity out to the connection at the street. We can probably, when this happened in Creemore, every house in Creemore had to connect, my family, my grandmother, my parents included, and it was a burden.
Was it
But when people,
$33,740?
Probably not that much, and it was 20 plus years ago, but it was an expense that was paid. It's paid for now. But word got around quick on who the good contractors were. People grouped together to get good prices. There's different technologies now. Like if you have a driveway and landscaping you're concerned about, like perhaps there's a directional bore machine. We've heard some people talking about the creek, a group who needed a directional bore company to come in and help with this work would probably get a better cost than just calling somebody up and asking them to come in. Just some suggestions. I'm happy to talk to people about some of the construction end of it if needed, but it just seems like there's a bunch of unknowns that are kind of worrisome. And
well, of course there is. Like, are you?
But just from the township, there's a whole bunch of unknowns that are not, like, we hear tonight that there might be a building permit, there might be a 2% increase. Like, these are all unknowns that we're all sitting with. So of course the street is in uproar. Like, that's a lot of money.
Sure, understood. And that's why we have this session to listen to everybody's comments. They'll be taken to council and considered.
Like if you go outside right now, even in the summertime, my sump pump runs every 3 minutes. Midsummer when it's dry outside, but my sump pump runs. You go down 3 feet, you hit water. If a house is 100 feet back from the road, am I going to have enough percentage of drop from my backyard to the street not to have clogging issues?
So that's a good question for Dawn, but So the pipe of the street will be roughly 8 feet deep. They'll have to dewater the entire street to put the pipe in the ground, which will take away from the water going to your house. And a 4-inch pipe goes in at 2%. So I don't know, what's 2% of 100 feet, Don? That's 2 feet, I guess. 2 feet of drop. So you come out of the house 4 feet deep, carry it to the sewer at the road, and by gravity on a 2% grade. And that's kind of, I know.
Well,
go ahead, Don.
It comes out of my house at the center. So I have 30 feet to the side of the house and then another 100 feet to the front. So I don't know. I'm just like you guys, it's easy to say 33,700, but there's a lot of people on this street. And honestly, my hearts went out to all the people that were at Brad's house there. I'm still working. They said they don't have 20 years. I don't know,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
I was speechless, and it it's a burden on everybody. Like for something that's on the other side, you could run on 26 on the other side, or if you're able to upgrade Phillips, you can upgrade the pipe to the fire station and go right to there and go across.
There just has to be other ways to think about this, because it's just not feasible for families on any family on this street. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua and Amy.
Thank you.
Our next participant is Laura Fry. I'm just going to bring her in. Hi, Laura. You're a participant now. You can turn on your microphone and your video. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm hoping it's coming through okay.
It is.
All good? Okay. I want to say thank you to the other homeowners who have spoken tonight, made wonderful points that I think hit home with all of us. We're all sort of in the same boat. I'll keep it short. I think we're all tired and emotional. But it comes back to the municipality. I feel like they're not doing enough. I'm more saying this as a rhetorical question because I just want it to be heard by council. But if there's funds set aside for urbanization and they've made it clear that that's what that is solely for, it's not going to be used elsewhere to help unburden us from this cost, then why aren't there funds set aside for this legislation that they have in place in order to make all the homes in town full service? I'm feeling like that should be a thing. We haven't heard anything about that. And just sort of going along with what everybody says, it's a huge financial burden. When I hear you guys speak about it, it sounds like just numbers, but we work for every single dollar that we make, and that's a ton of money. And I feel like you are minimizing it by saying it's just another $500. It's just another $170,000. Like that's not fair. This whole situation is unfair. And it makes us want to move. Honestly, we moved in March 2020, had no idea that this was a project that was upcoming. And honestly, if I did know that, we wouldn't be living here. So in saying that, if we were to put our house on the market, who's going to want to take on this burden? Nobody. They're going to either want the cost paid for up front, and that's going to deduct from the cost of that we can sell our home for. So either way you slice it, we're out probably over $40,000. And it's just, I'm at a loss for what to say.
Thank
Well,
you, Laura.
I think you're reflecting a lot of what we've heard from the other participants, so it's truly appreciated. And as I say, through this process, it's a process. So we're collecting the information. We will be back to council, and we'll address those matters as we can. If there's other ways that we can seek some funding, we will try. And as I say, we'll be back to council with further discussions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Our last participant is Jennifer Tour. I'm just going to bring her in. Hi, Jennifer. You can turn on your microphone and your camera. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name's Jennifer Tour. I am working with the Informal Resident Association on Sunnidale. So I'm working with, it's 33 of the households. You've received written comments from them tonight, and you've heard the verbal comments from a number of them. I promise I won't take long because I know that we are already an hour over the end of the session today. And I wanted to really thank everyone for the presentations and the information that was shared tonight. And in particular, want to let you know how much I appreciated you letting people express their concerns and add their personal stories to this picture. I think what I've been hearing from people is that that piece has been missing. People haven't felt heard through the process. And I think that tonight was a really great session. We will continue to share those stories through the council process. I had 4 written submissions from people that I was going to read, but I think that, you know, a lot of the commentary is similar to what you've already heard tonight. So I will share those in writing, but won't take up the time to read them tonight for you. There were a couple of themes that I wanted to really make sure, just as we're closing out the session, that we remember had come up today. The first was, we heard it from Diane and from Amy, and then again just now from Laura and others, that people really want to understand the process that has gone through here and what options have been considered. People want to understand how you've made your recommendations for this one option versus others, and really participate in digging into what options are available and make sure that sort of we've exhausted everything before we get to a place where residents have to bear a lot of the burden of the costs here. On that front as well, I do think that some more time being spent to talk about how costs are getting apportioned and how we're actually applying development charges through the legislation. Gary, I know you had to talk about it a bunch today, and I think that points to the fact that it would be really helpful for us to have another session where we talk about those numbers and talk about how things have been applied. So I have 3 really quick questions in that same vein. So the first is, just like Bruce had mentioned, I think as you were sharing more and more information today, I started writing down more and more questions. So I'm wondering if we will, if you can host another session like this one where we can have sort of an open forum and even provide some questions in advance. And can we do something like that before the October 25th council meeting?
Oh, Gary, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I was having a problem. It wouldn't let me unmute. I was figuring that was you. But no, that's a good question, Jennifer. I mean, I'll leave that. I'll direct this one actually to John. John's kind of their, you know, well, the leading staff and the direct conduit to council. So I know that's something we will discuss, but I'm not sure if you have any perspectives at this point, John.
I think the request is reasonable, but I'm going to have to check with council, and ultimately we'll have to set up a forum like this again and come in with those specific questions to be answered. But we should really try to narrow it down so that we really focus on exactly what the citizens are trying to get the exact information on, and make sure that we provide that, and gives us a little bit of time to get those calculations together or to show you how we come to those calculations.
Sure. And to the extent we can accommodate, I mean, you saw at Brad's house, he had to bring in a number of his neighbors. So people who just participating via Zoom is actually kind of difficult. If we can consider other accommodations to allow there to be some people who are gathered in a safe way, recognizing the times that we're in right now, I think that would also allow for more voices to be heard. So I just throw that out as something for us to think about. The second question I had was, we've heard in a number of circumstances here where, Gary, you had asked for some more information, and even for those calculations that Brad had done. Could you circulate for us a list of who we should ask questions to? It sounded like there were a few single points of contact for various pieces. I know that there are a lot more questions, and could you circulate a list of, you know, these types of questions should go to this person, or do you want everything to run through Gary, or I think you'd mentioned Jennifer at one point as well?
I think Sasha is the point person on receiving all the feedback. So it goes through the clerk, and then obviously it'll be distributed to the appropriate people. And honestly, collectively, we will all take a look at it. So everybody you see here will be going through reviewing those questions.
Okay, Sasha, I tried to get you out of a little work there, but we'll send them all through to you as the point of contact. And then the just final question / point that I'd like to make is, in future presentations, you heard it from Jean and from Gary and Diane and Brad and Monica, and Amy said it there at the end as well. There are a lot more costs than just the local improvement costs that we're talking about that will be a burden to the people in particular on Sunnidale. And in your future presentations, could we have as one of the slides, there'll be the $33,000, but we also know that we've talked about there being some utility cost increases, some tax increases. We know that there's going to be decommissioning costs for people and connection costs. Those will be different for every single property, but can we have on the future presentations just what the all-in cost would be for property owners, even just with a placeholder there to recognize that will be those decommissioning costs and the connection costs. I think that's a big part of the story here. And you heard people who are concerned about that overall, not just the 33,000.
Okay, that's a fair question. We'll take that and see how we can express that.
Thank you.
Don, did you want to also provide a comment?
Yeah, I guess just based to that last question and specifically to the servicing costs on private property and on the anticipation that some of the past participants are probably still watching and listening, it is difficult to come up with an exact cost in that. And I know that's not what Jennifer asked for. She acknowledged that every property will be different. And that does make it difficult. And all I can say is that in the final design processes, if the decision is to proceed, then the elevation of the discharge from the existing home, the distance from the discharge from the existing home to the connection at the property line, the location of the connection at the property line across the frontage to try to mitigate the impact on landscaping and driveways and asphalt driveways, all needs to be coordinated with some individual discussions with the property owners sort of through that final design stage as well. So it's unlikely that we can come up with it's going to cost X dollars for everybody because everybody is different.
Yeah, and even if you just said, let's make some assumptions, here's our case property that we're using. It just gives a sense of scale, I think.
Understood.
Those are great comments, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
That concludes all of our public participants for tonight's information session.
Perfect. Well, I'll just say thank you on my behalf, and I'm sure, John, you'd like to provide some closing remarks, and then we'll finish up the session.
Thank you, Gary. First of all, Gary, I want to thank you. A long night, a lot of talking, and I'm sure you're a little dry. Excuse me. I want to thank everybody for participating today and communicating to us. This will be good information, and our councils will be made aware, and we'll have that opportunity to discuss that with them. And in the meantime, I think you're going to be sending some information in, and we're going to see if we can possibly set up another meeting to deal with some more specifics. And ultimately, I also want to thank the staff that are on the screen here this evening. They put a lot of time and effort into this, but they do care about their communities and they do care about what you say. And I want to thank everybody for their participation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody. And thank you, Sasha, for coordinating all of this on our behalf.